Okay, hello there everyone, and welcome to today's University Business Web Seminar. It's great to have you all with us. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kurt Eisler-Durley. I'm the Web Seminar Editor for UB, and I'll be your moderator. The title of our event here today, as you see here, is Creating a Campus-Wide Professional Learning Platform, and is being brought to you through the generous support of our sponsor, Cornerstone OnDemand. First, as some in our audience are still coming in here, I'll just start with a bit of background about our topic and what we'll be taking a look at here today. When it comes to professional development and compliance training for faculty, staff, and student employees, many institutions rely on a large number of siloed, separate systems. By instead moving to a central, shared learning platform, institutions are able to track and report on the progress of training, better plan for the future, and more effectively meet business needs across departments. Today we're joined by two leaders from the Ohio State University who are responsible for Buckeye Learn, OSU's shared online learning and professional training platform, serving faculty, staff, student employees, contractors, and volunteers, who will describe how they developed the platform and some best practices for taking this approach at any institution. We're looking forward to a very interesting presentation here for you and discussion, plus live Q&A. We welcome your questions, so do stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a minute or two here. Before we do, just some quick housekeeping. First off, for tech support, if you need any technical support at any time, you can use the chat panel at the right of your screen. As it says here, just send a message to our host and producer. His name is Joseph Morrow. Just choose his name there. Let him know if you're having any technical difficulties. And speaking of that chat panel, as it says here, if you don't have computer speakers or if you prefer to listen privately, if you're having any trouble with your computer audio at any time, you may have noticed we posted the phone number and access code in the chat panel at the right of your screen there. You can use those to get audio access over the phone if you need it at any time. Also, as I mentioned, questions. If you have a question for our panelists today, please feel free to use the Q&A panel. As it says here, bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Make sure it's set to all panelists there. Feel free to enter a question at any time as we're going. Just type it in that Q&A there, and we will get to as many questions as we can during the Q&A at the end. So once again, if you have a question, feel free to type it in at any time in the Q&A at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Speaking of questions, as it says here, the final item on the screen, if you're interested in accessing the presentation at a later time, this is a common question we get. We will be making the slides available and the archive recording. This is being recorded and will be archived on the UB site. So you'll get access to those later on. Everyone who registered here today will be getting an email with links to those so you can access it later. So don't worry about that. Also, one other note, we will be taking a couple poll questions here today. So when we reach that point in the presentation, you'll see a polling window appear at the right margin of your screen there. Just choose your answer and click Submit at the bottom. And thanks in advance for your presentation, and that'll be part of informing our presentation and discussion here. So, okay, with that out of the way here, on to our presentation. We're very fortunate to have with us this team from Ohio State. Julie Webker is Release Manager at Ohio State, and John Votino is Application and Operations Manager for Buckeye Learn, and they both work on Buckeye Learn there at OSU. Julie and John are in the same room there together, so at this point I'll turn it over to them. Julie and John, it's great to have you with us here today. Welcome to our web seminar.
Thank you very much. We're happy to join everybody today. We really appreciate everyone's time and frankly talking about a subject that I know John and I both actually really enjoy talking about. So it's definitely a great opportunity and we really appreciate that. So as we get started, So again, my name is Julie Webker. About 20 years of experience in IT and training and different things, a lot of different roles. I think at one point I figured out that I probably had done every role in the training and education development you possibly could do, from content developer all the way to actually teaching. So, I kind of feel like that's been very helpful in kind of understanding, a lot of what maybe you're doing and what we're doing, and being able to do that better. John?
Hi, everybody. My name is John Patino. I'm Buckerland Application Operations Manager, and my whole career actually has been at Ohio State in different IT fields, starting from customer support, training, systems analyst, working with developers, and all that whole range of activity.
Definitely makes for a very interesting view of things. So today we're going to talk through some of the goals and the strategies that we went through in our implementation of a centralized managed LMS. So in speaking of that, in terms of that Cornerstone implementation, we're also going to talk through the governance framework and the freedom and ownership. How are we able to really manage quite a large group of people using that system and doing it successfully, and still kind of really giving them the chance to own that themselves, and really put their mark on how they deliver their training. And finally, we'll talk through some of the challenges and opportunities. My guess would be that some of you are working on other systems or LMSs, are probably either are or have been, or maybe in the future may experience some of the same things. And so it'll give us a chance to talk through that a little bit more, and maybe even find some solutions for some of those issues and items. So part of the goal then today is to discuss how that governance strategy does allow you to allow university departments to work within a framework, to implement a system that allows for consistency, for centralized reporting, for easier administration, or at least distributed administration across the university or your institution, and creating some autonomy. So those learning experiences that are geared toward unique business needs, unique content needs, lots of different reasons why you do need some flexibility in that. So the first poll question we wanted to talk through is, does your institution utilize a centrally managed learning management system for your faculty and staff? Is that something that you're doing today? I'll give it just a moment for you to answer that question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie. It looks like we don't have this poll question ready here. We'll just have to go on.
Oh, okay. Well, and then that is just fine. I'll just move on. That's not a problem at all. No worries.
We have one.
You got it?
Let's see. Okay, yeah, it's just the wording's a little bit different, but
all
it
right.
looks like we've got it. Okay.
All right, great. Great. We'll give everybody a minute to answer that. No problem. Thank you. And as I understand it, as that finishes, we'll actually look at those poll questions together, and we'll certainly use that as an opportunity to tailor some of those things, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about it during that Q&A portion as well. Great, very interesting. So it's actually a very interesting kind of halfway in between, so that's great. So that means hopefully, again, you'll have something to offer, as well as maybe even taking something from us, as well as maybe some of the other participants today. So that is great. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, so let's talk through, now that we've kind of established kind of where everybody is and what they're thinking about, some of the goals, project goals and strategies. Why did we even engage in looking at bringing in a centralized LMS? So the goals and strategies of our project were to address the ones that you see here: delivering and tracking non-academic training. We had no desire, no need, no real purpose in trying to disrupt what was happening on the academic side. The academic LMS runs great. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's integrated with their information system. It's really doing its thing. So not disrupting that was important, along with really kind of separating them and saying, we also care about delivering and tracking that academic training. We wanted to empower learners to have the opportunity to find, sign up for, and execute their own training. So we want to empower them to do that on their own. We wanted to empower managers to have some control over assigning things, checking on what their folks were doing, using that as an opportunity in their performance conversations. We also wanted to empower our compliance areas. Many of the compliance areas are in different areas of the university. They don't necessarily have exactly the same trainings that they were doing. We wanted to allow them to say, you know what, as a university, we want everyone to have this FERPA training, and that enables them to do that. We also wanted to look at distributed administration. So the Buckeye Learn team is actually a very small team that supports a very large university. So being able to say, can we keep the cost down? Can we actually do that and have a university-wide system? That was a big part of it. We also want to distribute content ownership, looking at the framework that allows us for consistent reporting and monitoring. Looking at the large expert network, we have a huge network of folks that are really great in the system and have a lot of knowledge. And also looking at a framework for diversity in business processes. We know that our agriculture department does not manage it the same way as our business department. So being able to think about that and saying, can we have flexibility, was a really huge part of what we were looking for. So I wanted to take us through the current, the state, well, where were we in 2014? What was really prompting us to look at this? What was prompting us to say, hey, we got to do these things? So one of the things was duplicated training. We had like 6 different versions of HIPAA. We had 5 different versions of FERPA training. We had, gosh, I'm trying to think of some of the others, lots of different leadership, lots of diversity, which is good, but we were having a difficult time really honing that down. We had lots of different delivery systems, quite a few LMSs, hosted in different departments, all very different user experiences. We had no centralized reporting other than folks actually giving someone a report centrally and having them brought together. We had no way to actually see a picture. We also had very limited centralized process for tracking things. So what really came down to it is really each department did it on their own. So our current state, so what did we actually get out of going through this process of implementing the system? We actively reduced the duplication through standards and governance. So it took us a while, but we got to the point where we have one HIPAA course for the entire university. One. That was a really big deal. I think I remember that day, and we high-fived on that one. That was a really big deal. Centralized employee training, being able to say, I know everybody who took a certain training. I know when they took it. I know how well they did. And I can also, that gives me a chance also to see, hey, we've got some pretty good usage going on there. Centralized reporting, I can say at any point who needs to take HIPAA again for the next year, who is compliant, who's not. And then progress tracking, who needs to get where they need to be? Are they, halfway through? Do I need to send them an email and say, hey, let's see what else we can do to help you get that done? So being able to do those things in this current state has really helped us to really, get a really good handle on what's happening at the university at any point. Another thing we were looking at is tracking the training and regulation policy training, ownership, and versioning. So for instance, we have a data policy training, and that's something that's really important to us, and we do it every single year, and everybody needs to do it. This gave us a chance to put that policy, that one in the hands of one person that said, yep, I own that policy, I own the completion, and I own the sense of what does it mean to be done? What does it mean to be compliant with our policies? We had limited standards of end-user experience. So as I'm sure you can imagine, with a lot of different LMSs, people are experiencing a very different experience. They had different logins, they had different places to go, different links, no centralized transcript, no way to say, yep, I took all these 10 things from this place. There was really no way to do that. So now we have a common set of standards, a common transcript, and a way to report on the breadth of the training that folks are doing. There was limited governance in the sense that really departments were doing that. And then there is value in that, so I'm certainly not dispelling any value of individualized departmental work, but I think the big difference is now that we have a steering committee and an operations committee, we can really work through governance in the sense of what is benefiting the university, how are we able to keep that centralized but still have some freedom within that. So if someone says, I'm going to make this FERPA training, I'm the policy owner, I own it, but it still meets the standards, so everyone's getting a similar experience. And hopefully, what would be the ultimate goal would be a positive experience. So in going through that as well, there are real challenges and opportunities, as I'm sure you can imagine. I think, John, you'll have to tell me what's the current number of folks that we have actually active in the system today.
We're signing in is around 45,000 taking training.
That's amazing. So we figure 45,000 folks taking training, you know, at any given day, any given time, and certainly probably pushing that toward the end of the fiscal year as well as the end of the budget, you know, the calendar year. We figure that's a lot of folks that we're trying to keep in mind with, 40 business units and, you know, all kinds of things going on. So putting that in perspective, when we think about challenges and opportunities, some of the things that we found the most helpful as we were going through this process was the things you see listed here. The top two that I actually have starred would be identifying and engaging champions and engaging sponsors. Those two things happened 3 years before we even got the system on campus and implemented. And what that got us to do is we had people that were cheering us on. We had folks that were saying, yes, this is important. We had folks that were willing to put the financial backing behind it, and they really were on board, and they got excited about it, and they could talk about it in an excited way, and they could go to leadership meetings. They could go to, you know, President Drake and say, yes, this is something really cool, and we are going to be able to really bring our university forward. So having those folks early on was extremely important. Engaging our sponsorship, being a little bit different than the champion, as in those, again, those folks who can actually financially support it. So between those two groups, we had great project managers who were super champions. We had great sponsors who were willing to back it and to make sure we had what we needed. So those two things, I would say, if I had to put a fine point on it, would be the most important. Data governance, that has one that's, we always knew it was important, and we really started from day one with standards, but we have refined those and found the things that are important. And spending the time to do that has, I think, has improved the user experience. It certainly improved the amount of folks using the system because they know they're going to get a good experience out of it. Content standards. How can we make sure that things are accessible? How can we make sure that they're consistent? How can we make sure that when I jump from one training to another that I'm having a good, consistent experience? Those content standards are helping us. Retention policies, making sure folks understand what it means to deprecate a course. You know, when something is gone, what do we do with that? Internal and external audiences. For us, that was a big one. We've got a huge volunteer population. We had to really think about how to manage those, and I can tell you it's a lot more complex than it sounds. It's a big deal, but we've found ways to manage volunteers in a way that, you know, really brings them up through the Ohio State way, but also make sure we're compliant. Change management. We found change management was a big deal. We spent a lot of time. I kind of laugh about it now. It was not funny at the time, but change management was really big. People were like, well, in my old system, I could do this. You know, my old system was better in this way. And really helping them to see that we're moving to something new, but it can be positive. So a lot of change management activities that were really important. We also wanted to gain those flexibilities in business processes. I think one of the things that I've heard, especially from the medical center as we work with them, is that even within the medical center, they need flexibility. They have different businesses. And really recognizing those and appreciating those and configuring your system from a technical standpoint to manage it was a big deal for us as well. The implementation process, we discovered a lot of new things, and you know, a lot of the assumptions we had changed. But again, that's not a bad thing. It's actually kind of cool in many ways. We discovered ways that we could assist the university in furthering the university's goals. Administrator governance. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we found also that there is a skill set associated with an administrator that makes that administrator really effective, or, hey, it's just an extra thing on their job. And we found that to have a good administrator means that you've got a good partner, you've got a good advocate, again, you have that sponsor and champion in the department. That was really important to foster that. And finally, and I should not in any way ever dismiss tracking and reporting last, but tracking and reporting has probably been the biggest outcome, if nothing else. And can we at any one time tell people what's going on? We absolutely can. And I have to say that That to me, as a data-driven person, is extremely exciting. If someone says, well, gosh, how many people logged in today? I can tell you, and I can do it immediately. So that was a real challenge. It was a challenge to understand that, but it was an opportunity in knowing how to show the value of what we were doing. That is definitely a big deal. So we have another poll question for you. Ooh, that was fast. Very good. Thank you very much. So has your institution experienced similar challenges? Because we talked about a lot of different challenges and opportunities. And maybe if you've not implemented an LMS, have you experienced it maybe in a different type of technical project? Something where you had to be a champion or something that you were trying to get done? We'll give that a minute to come through. Oh, I guess I should answer too, shouldn't I? Oh, is it closed now? Gotcha. I answered the last one, so apparently I pushed the pushed the number of response a little bit. Well, cool. So when the answers come up, we'll take a peek at that. Maybe. There they are. Great. Well, I can't say that I'm shocked, but I would imagine that that's probably something pretty consistent. But thank you for answering the question regardless. That's wonderful. That's great. That's great. I would say if you said you didn't have any challenges, I might not actually believe you. But we all experience them in different ways, and I think that's really the important part. Is those challenges come in all different shapes and sizes and all different depths. So I think it's great to kind of recognize those and be like, yeah, I think we've all been there. So hopefully there are kind of ways to address them. So we spent a lot of time talking about the project. We spent a lot of time talking about the goals. We spent a time talking about what we achieved. Now we're 2 years out from full, about 2 years out from full implementation. We've been live. We've been through several things. Now from an operational standpoint, we're still really managing against those project goals. We're still managing that freedom within the framework. We're still kind of maintaining what we started. And I can say that I'm very, very, very pleased to say that that's been a major goal. And I feel like we've achieved that. Because it's like constantly on my mind. I'm sure it's constantly on John's mind. Definitely always, we really care about that and make sure it's true. So when we talk about, the actual, once we were implemented, I wanted to go a little bit through, what did we actually implement? So what did we achieve through that implementation? So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Cornerstone. If you get a chance to take a look, definitely do, because there's a breadth of things. But Cornerstone is really built to be a full-service platform. So it has everything from full performance to onboarding to payroll, or I should say payroll, like salary, kind of managing salary, all different kinds of pieces in that whole really employee life cycle. So when you think about that employee life cycle, we could have purchased all of those things. We chose not to. So what we have is the learning module, and that's another important thing too, is it's a modular system. So even though I say, yes, it has everything, we chose to only purchase certain pieces. So we have the learning, which gives us the LMS, the actual LMS functionality, which lets us have learning objects and prerequisites, requirements, put them in curricula, things like that. Connect, which is a threaded discussion, as well as extended enterprise. So I mentioned a little bit early on about our volunteers or those external users. That extended enterprise kind of sits on top of learning and connect and gives us the ability to bring folks from outside. They don't necessarily have to have all of the university identity management pieces, but they can still access the content if we give them access. So with those three pieces, we got a lot of bang for our buck in those three pieces. We get the ability to really manage that learning. And then in addition to that, obviously, we've got the reporting, which is a piece. It's not a module, but reporting comes with that, and some of the other instructor-led training pieces. Those are all included as you look at it. So you really get a very wide breadth. In addition to that, because of the way that system works, we're able to configure it for that, we call it distributed administration. So we've got people that do lots of different roles in lots of different departments and we are able to assign that role and let them do just the stuff they need to do. So they can do training content, they can do proxy enrollments, which a proxy enrollment basically is enrolling for someone else. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If all of a sudden a new regulation came out tomorrow and someone says, oh my goodness, we got to assign that regulation training to everybody at the university, we would be able to do that for them. And it would be something we could just do it. They've changed the name of that. It's not called proxy enrollment anymore, but it's a learning assignment. But that's essentially what that is. And then settings. So they have a few settings for their department that they can set. You know, they have a few things that they can say, I'd really like it to look like this, or I really want my email to look like this when it goes out, and allowing them to have some flexibility in what they do. So who can use Buckeye Learn? So as I mentioned, we've got all these pieces that allow us to do internal and external, but we are focusing on faculty and staff. We have extensive training offered for our student employees. So for instance, my daughter is actually starting her job here at the university, and she already has training assigned to her because she'll be working with student data. So she'll be taking FERPA training to make sure she understands about data policy. So non-employees, so the sponsored guests, contractors, so they're sometimes called contingent workers, folks who work on campus. Maybe I volunteer for the plant sale every year, but I'm not an employee, but I still need to know PCI compliant training. So being able to make sure all those folks have what they need, that system is allowing us to do that. So from an operational standpoint, we have to keep up on it, and it takes daily work from our standpoint to do that, but it's very valuable work. So governance structure. So how do we maintain all this stuff? How do we make decisions? How do we actually get things done? How do we deal with stuff that's hard? So we have a governance structure. As you can see here at the bottom, we've got our operations committee. So the operations committee working groups. So those are the folks that are getting down into those little details. Great example of that is we wanted some wording to go in our ILTs that talked about what it means to attend a training. So we have a work group that went off and discussed putting together the criteria for being able to mark someone as having attended or not. It's not that everybody had to implement that, but we wanted to at least recognize that there was some fluidity on what it meant to attend. The operations committee itself is the broader committee. That committee is working together to make some decisions. And above that, then we have some business unit liaisons, which I don't think we actually have any of those right now. The intent of that was to be more like, hey, I don't really want to be in the operations committee, but I want to know what's going on. And then you get back up to the top, and you've got your steering committee. So they're making the big decisions. They're making broader implementation decisions. They're making broad decisions on how we spend our funds, whether or not we do our cost structure differently. So they're really looking at it at that really high level. And if we need help, they can actually go back to other groups. So in digging into the details, our steering committee has 11 members. They're senior VP and level and above. So we've got folks who are reporting directly to the provost, into those senior leadership meetings. So if something great's going on, we know they can take that to that higher level meeting and say, hey, the Buckeye Learn team is doing awesome. So we have that kind of cheerleader, but we also have, hey, we've got this issue and we need your help. They help to manage the overall governance of the system. They also approve units for implementation. Now, we've been very fortunate that we've not had to turn anybody away. We've been able to implement as requested, but the system would allow us to say if we all of a sudden had an influx, we just really couldn't get all that work done at once, they'd be able to help us to decide, hey, this is a high priority for other reasons, because they may actually be involved in the business decisions, the prioritization, or higher university level policies that may be driving why that decision would be made. Also issuing issues regarding ownership, reporting, and risk. So again, when I think about, I'm trying to think of a good example of that one that we've had recently. We did, maybe this is a good example. We did some work with some folks who were offering external training, and we had to make some decisions around how we would do a chargeback for that. And it wasn't complicated, but we just all needed to be on the same page. And I really appreciated having those folks to give their perspective on how the departments are doing that, what that cost structure looks like, how other things have been funded. Because I don't necessarily have that perspective, so that was extremely helpful in making those decisions and, again, getting help in implementing it. So our operations committee, we now have 37 members, which is amazing, by the way, just so you know, that's wonderful. We have about 10 to 12 that come regularly, but everybody gets the same information. Everyone has the opportunity to attend that meeting, to vote on things, to put their, to put their 2 cents in, to bring up issues, to bring up things they're proud of to show others, which is great. They can also request features and configurations. They might say, we've never turned on this feature, but I'd love it if you did. That is an opportunity where they can say, this is why, this is when I might need it, this would be helpful to me, and have others to hear that too. Because a lot of the times, especially with a distributed administration system, not everybody's using the same features all the time. Like for instance, in my job, I'm not actually using Connect, the threaded discussion. I never touch Connect. But I know others are, so if I said to myself, hey, I want to start using Connect, I'm going to go find that guy and ask him questions and get help, or find out the effective ways of using it. It's also a good way of sharing best practices. What are some of the better ways to offer accessible content? What are some of the effective ways of having instructor-led training and being able to assess their learning? So everything from the technical pieces all the way to the learning components. That group has such a breadth of knowledge. It's been really helpful to everybody. We also vote on features and configurations. So what's great about Cornerstone is on a quarterly basis, they're going to release new features. They're going to change functionality sometimes. They're going to improve the interface. They're going to give us more to work with. But you have the choice as to when you actually implement those things. So you really do need a committee to look at the breadth of the things being released and saying, I think we've got the appetite for this change, or this is not a big change which won't hurt my, won't hurt my folks. There might be a massive change that would change the way people use things, and you might want to operate under a change management window in order to get people used to the idea and get prepared to use it. I'm trying to think, I don't think we've had any that have been so dramatic that we had to say, oh my gosh, stop, don't do it. I don't feel like we have. Have you seen it, John?
No, it is a great opportunity. As Julie stated, the way that Cornerstone does this is they give us each quarterly release, 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time. They'll share with us all the features that are going to be released for each quarterly release, and we can then take that to our operations committee, have them get in and test these new features in our stage environment. And then, as Julie said, we can discuss, make sure all the business units are okay with that, and then vote and decide whether to implement or not.
Yeah. And without without the mechanism of that operations committee, we would have the potential of making a decision without all of that knowledge. There might be stuff that we just don't know. So that's when the really good thing about operations is we get a chance to have everybody have an opportunity to weigh in and make a change, or decide not to, quite frankly. That's good too. That's a very valid way of going about it. So the operations team itself, I mentioned a little bit early on, I didn't want to completely go into that whole thing at that point, but this is a great time. The operations team is actually really small. It's only 4 folks. And 4 folks who are supporting 144,000 people in the system with 45,000 folks actively taking training. So if you can imagine, that's actually a really big deal. They are able to do that. It's managed as a service. So at the university, I'm sure you have a similar concept. It's a service that can be requested, that can be managed. It's something that is, like I said, it's amazing that a small team can do it. So I'm certainly very proud of them for the wonderful job that they do. Now, what you might see here that's unique, and early on we also talked about sponsorship, and we talked about champions. This is one of the other ways that we've maintained the sponsorship and champions, is that this team actually does sit in IT. So the Office of the Chief Information Officer, they sit in IT, they sit in the IT building, they work with those folks, they work with technical people all the time. However, they have a strong attachment and a strong connection to HR. We had a fabulous, really great champion in HR who was able to help keep us focused on that, again, and be a sponsor. And that way, people don't see this as, oh, this is an IT thing and IT is making us do it. Oh no, this is a university thing. We are a university service. We serve the university. We are not just IT. And I cannot emphasize what a big deal that is. I don't know about you, John, but I know every time we would meet with folks, We always are really clear about that because we want people to know that we serve the university.
Yeah, we have this slide on all of our implementation presentations that we do with each group that we meet with, so that they fully understand that they do have some ownership here when they implement, they become part of that operations team. It's not just a system that's managed and housed in one area of the university.
Exactly. And not that there's anything wrong with things being owned by IT. Don't get me wrong. It's not, but when it comes to learning, sometimes that's really sensitive. So I think that that was a really smart move by the folks who initiated this project to make sure that there was sponsorship across fields, across all of the different things that we do. And I can tell you it's made getting things done a lot easier. And I think people really, they've gotten used to the idea of a centrally managed system because they know that we have everybody's best interest in mind. That has really, really been a big deal. So the operations team itself, so you might think, okay, so you sit in IT, are you all developers? Actually, no, which is good. We have super admins, so really the highest level administrator sit on that team. They can configure the system, they can manage the service desk, so help desk essentially. They can manage system training, so making sure that folks know how the system works. They can help to implement new units in the system, as well as coordinate and run the operations committee. So they're doing a lot of work, and again, they're sitting in IT, but what's interesting is the key competencies for an administrator is maybe not what you might think. They're not developers and coders. I am certainly not. I know John isn't, but what we are, though, is analytical, and we're highly organized, and we have strong communication skills. We have a strong understanding of reporting and needs of the business. So we don't go into it and saying, oh, which data points do you want? We say, well, what are you trying to achieve as you go through an implementation? What are your learning outcomes? You know, what are your bigger goals? How do you need to report to leadership? So it's that mindset, that analytical, that business analysis. Those things are making, I think, what we do more valuable to the university. And what we actually kind of laugh about this a little bit. We probably spend the most of our time in project management. Honestly, it's really a lot of really high-end PM skills. It's a lot of time breaking up work, figuring out how we can go live with, what's the minimum you can go live with so you can keep moving. We spend a lot of time in that area, and I think again that's a valuable place to spend time. Certainly valuable from the effort standpoint as well, because we get training out a lot faster. We can help folks implement quicker. So I thought this is one of those busy slides that people see and go, oh, there's too much text. But when you think about documentation, we actually have to support all this stuff, right? So we have a distributed administration standards that define all of the pieces that we need. We have content standards that define all of those to as much degree of detail as we can possibly get to. And we do maintain a steering committee charter. So as we think about all of the things that we're doing, like I said, it's exciting. I love to talk about it. Our project management goals, I feel like, have been realized, and I think that we're every day even making tiny improvements, even big improvements. Some days you get a big win, you're like, woo, I got it, and it's awesome. It's super exciting. So we chose a system that allowed us to meet our goals, and I think that's really a big key to us. We looked at lots of different systems, but it happened to be that Cornerstone really met those requirements. We could deliver and track the non-academic training. We could empower our learners to have control using their transcripts. We could allow managers to have control in compliance areas to have some autonomy, distributed administration responsibilities. We could distribute this to keep the centralized cost down. We can actively maintain that governance structure. So we meet regularly. We talk regularly. We don't cancel unless there's just, every once in a while something's not going on. Well, it's rare, but it happens. We continue to build a library of training. I think, what is the number? Do you know the number off the top of your head, John?
Check it real quick.
We'll look and see, but last I checked, I think we had like 10,000 learning objects, all created by folks at the university. That would not have even been possible if we were totally centrally managed. So that is a big deal. We improved the system for configuration and implementing new features as delivered. So we're able to continuously improve our system. Literally every quarter, if we wanted to, we could improve it every week. It's the kind of thing where it never has to stop. We continue to implement new units. Like, how many active units do you have in implementation right now, John?
Yeah, so being, like you said, 2 years in really, from
Yeah.
actually going live, I keep having this thought that we'll get to the point where we'll have implemented everybody and we'll be able to focus on some other things. But
No.
yeah, we're at 9 active implementations right now.
Out of what, 37 active?
Yeah,
they're done.
That are done.
Yeah,
completed.
so 37 done and 9 more.
Yep.
So it's been constant. Like, I really thought too, I'm like, oh, it'll slow down. It never slowed down. So that's actually really exciting. Oh, and the last one, of course, improving reporting. The reporting, I have to say, I love reporting, but it really, it's been great. People have really appreciated being able to know what's going on at all the times. So key takeaways. So as we kind of wrap up the presentation, what are the key takeaways? I think I've emphasized these pretty hard, but I'll still go through them again. Is identifying and engaging your champions early and often. Once you get those folks on board, you get them excited, you get them to where they can really, really champion what you need, and looking at it broadly, that made all the difference. It really helped us to be successful, and like I said, we had really good ones. I appreciate them every day. We involved our sponsors, and the same thing, early and often. They were excited about it. They really helped us get things done. I recommend highly prioritizing and developing your data governance standards. As boring and annoying as that sounds, engage your data folks early. If you have data standards folks, one of the hardest things about these things and why you get the most value out of reporting is if your data is clean, if it has the right stuff in it, it makes your reports beautiful because then you get exactly what you want out of them. So I would definitely recommend doing that. Think about your content standards too. Can you get to a point where you're pretty standard? Folks will be able to go from one training to another and have it be a much more seamless process. And we find that when that doesn't happen, that's when you get like a lot of tickets on something or you get a lot of questions when that does not occur. So it's definitely a great thing to focus on. And again, tracking and reporting, it's definitely engage that early too, because the data points that you capture will be the ones that you'll be able to report on later. And I know in the implementation process, you'll get a lot of help from your folks in helping to do that and identify it. And certainly, I'm sure internal folks will be able to help you too. And then identifying administrative roles. And part of this comes to job design. Now, I haven't talked much about this, but this is one thing that's always kind of been on my mind is we talk about distributed administration, and distributed administration being folks in other parts of the university. Probably 95%, if not more, of the folks that work with us, managing Buckeye Learn is not their primary job. Now, that's a good thing, and it's a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing because that means that it's a new development area for them. The only downside of that is sometimes when it comes to testing, when it comes to being able to engage in the meetings, they have a harder time. And that's where hopefully your sponsors and your champions can help to say, hey, you know, if you are going to distribute this, think about how many hours a week that might take for that person to do that job, maybe on top of their other, or how does that add value to their current job? So just something to think about. I don't know, you have anything else on that one you want to add to it?
No, I think that's great. It's exactly what Julie said. So the 4 of us on the Buckeye Learn support team are 100% dedicated, and then the rest of that operations committee who we work so closely with, it's most of the time some additional responsibilities that are tacked on to the rest of what they're doing on their job. And as Julie stated, right, so it's great. It allows that distributed administration because we wouldn't be able to handle it as a 4-person team. But when you get down into some more of the technical discussion, even testing or voting on some of those functionalities is where you can sometimes run into a little bit of an issue. So really thinking about that in depth to understand what responsibilities should our distributed administrators have, and explaining that to these people clearly as you're doing your implementation meeting so that they have a full understanding of what they're signing up for, I guess, if they become a operations OU admin.
Yeah, and I can speak from my perspective too, is, you know, having moved from having managed the team to a slightly different role at the university, which is great. And as I am one of the distributed administrators, I can tell you I don't get a chance to participate 100% of the time. And so, and I know it's a little frustrating for me because I'm like, oh, I didn't get to vote on that feature. But I know that that's the case, and I know that I have the opportunity to engage, and I know that it's a conversation I have to have with my manager. Hey, I know it's going to take me X number of hours a week to truly participate and give John the feedback he needs to do the testing I should do. But as I said, it's really kind of a go in eyes wide open and knowing kind of what you need. And if you put that against, let me go back to the other slide. The key competencies, you kind of look at both of those things together, it really starts to give you a good picture of the folks that will help you to implement and to have long-term success in using a system like this. Because again, the system does not need coders and developers. Well, there are pieces of it that need that, so don't get me wrong, but the daily operational pieces can be done by those folks with those really strong skills. So hopefully that gives you a good picture of kind of where we came from and where we are today. And I think we can actually move into the question and answer.
Great.
So hopefully you guys got something out of that and we were able to bring some value to your day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie and John. You covered a lot of ground there. Really appreciate everything that you shared with us here. Just real quick, a couple reminders here. We are getting to the Q&A portion. We did get some questions and comments asking about accessing the slides and the recording. And again, everyone will be getting access to these slides later on, so you don't have to worry about that. And another reminder, if you do have a question, just enter it in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. We're getting a bunch of great questions here. Thanks to everybody who's been submitting. Let's see, first question for you, Julie and John, asked, do you use this system for continuing education offerings for training for those outside of the institution or not?
Yes, that is an excellent question. So yeah, we kind of touched on that external, and I'll answer a little bit, and I'm going to pass it over to John too, is yes, there is continuing education pieces for folks that are outside the university. So some of those being some of the volunteer type things, is not exactly continuing ed, but we do have a partnership with, I don't know if we can say who it is. Tell you what, so I don't get in trouble, I'm going to say we have a partnership with an auto manufacturer and where we work with them to distribute training and manage training for folks who are learning the English language. So, you know, half the interface is actually in Japanese, and as they move through the program, the rest of it is in English. So it's kind of a neat program. Are there other continuing ed stuff that's in there now?
Yeah, I think like what you said, we have a couple of areas that we're using that extended enterprise functionality with, like what we just mentioned. And then the other area is for that compliance training with our volunteers, right? So we have so many volunteers that work with our athletics, summer camps, and things like that.
Right. Yes.
Where they have to come and take some of our compliance trainings, sometimes 2 days before they're supposed to show up. So we use that extended enterprise to allow them to register, provide the training to them, and then we can report on it, obviously, to make sure that they can come and work with the people they're supposed to work with.
Yes, yeah, that's like the youth minors training. So, yeah, for folks who are working with the young people in what do they call that? It's not control, it's access and control. I can't really quite name it, but basically that way they can work with those kids. So yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, sure. Next, this is a two-part question. I'll maybe just do the first part. You talked about the importance of champions in that prior to implementation here. Someone asked, were those champions individual contributors or leaders, or who were some of those champions for you?
Oh yeah, good question. So we had a couple HR leaders. So actually, that's not even true. We had one main HR leader. We had a leader from OCIO, so our Office of the Chief Information Officer. We had another one from the College of Arts and Sciences. We had another one from our Business and Finance area, and we had another from our Med Center. So we had one from some of the larger groups. As we've transitioned, some of those folks have rolled off. They've gone to different different things. You know, now we have some folks in the College of Engineering. We still have some from Med Center. I'm trying to think who else is on there now, but that's a great question. So we tried to get a breadth of those champions in place from different areas that had possibly very diverse business needs, so that we could keep those in mind. Because I can tell you, like the business and finance area, totally different business needs than Med Center. So definitely was really helpful.
Okay, absolutely. And then the second part of that question asking, are the administrators in different departments here or centralized in one department? It seems to be a structural question.
Yeah, they're all over. They're all over. So there are, like, what now, 10 administrators in the medical center? I think there's 10 maybe. You know, there's a couple in HR, you know, there's some in business and finance, there's a number. It's fairly well distributed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. You talked about the decision to go with Cornerstone at one point there, and some of the reasons why. There were some questions asking about that. What was the deciding factor making the decision to select this product over other options? I don't know if you can boil it down to one, or are there a few highlights of why you went with Cornerstone?
Yeah. No, I can definitely do that. So a couple of the major ones that were kind of in the last section were SumTotal. I'm sure folks are familiar with that one. SumTotal has, I can't actually say they have similar features, but I know that from a footprint standpoint, I believe that they talk about themselves as offering the same thing, so that's not one I'm terribly familiar with. The other one was Net Learning, and Net Learning is often used in the medical fields, and they've been around a very long time. The medical center actually just used them. So they were all in the running. What it really came down to was the ability to have a very deeply configurable system that would allow us to accommodate for the business processes and the business needs. So one example I'll give you is that employee records are very interesting. So John and I are lucky in the sense that he and I only have one employment record. So I work for OCIO. John works for OCIO. I know who his boss is. I know who my boss is. We have folks who have up to 6 or more employment records. And given the fact that they have those employment records, we really have to get to a point where we can say all of them are important and we need to know what they are. So this was one of the systems that allowed us to do that, and actually did it pretty well, really, because it's a complicated thing. So I don't think any system can do it awesomely, because it's just complex to have multiple bosses, multiple departments, multiple jobs, but it's just the way of the university system, and it allowed us to do that really well. And we can use, and we haven't talked about this, but there's a group functionality that allows us to then group those folks to start to build them out as, hey, this is an affinity group who all needs this training, or this is an affinity group that needs this training regardless of the department that they sit in. So it gives us some flexibility. So I'm trying to give an example. So if you have 10 hospitals, and you have doctors at 10 hospitals, and those doctors do all different things, but maybe those doctors have one set of training they all have to take. I don't have to look at their location. I don't have to look at their hospital. I don't have to look at any of that stuff. I can just say they're a doctor with these set of criteria. They can take this training. So I would say in the end, Cornerstone really allowed us that flexibility from the employment records, as well as, you know, just really detailed administration.
Sure. Okay. Someone else asks, do you have any best practices you can share when it comes to change management in that aspect of launching your LMS? I think you mentioned change management being a big factor, maybe more than you anticipated. Oh, yeah.
Change management's always fun. So I can actually, so what's interesting about this one, so we truly launched, just to give you an idea of timeline, we truly launched our project to actually get this done in January 2015. So in launching that, one of the concerted efforts we did was we started communication then. Hey, we're starting this project. And then a couple months later, hey, let's bring in some of our ground level folks that we're going to go live with. So we have 5 departments that we're going to go live with, big departments. We brought those folks in so they could start talking about it. They got actively involved. They've had lots of influence on the way things were implemented. Then, as we got toward the summertime, we're like, great, we're going to do a pilot. So we did a pilot with a small group of people distributed all over the university to start to get that to roll out. Then towards the fall, we said, okay, great, now we're ready to do a rollout. So we rolled it out in the fall and used that fall, beginning of the school year, to start to say, hey, everybody, there's training out there. Go take a look. And then we said to folks, hey, if you have training, let's get that implemented. So we used really a very slow burn over about a 6-month period to get more and more folks engaged. We started rolling out key trainings that were important for everybody to take. Sexual harassment policy, everybody had to do it, so we're like, you know, this is a great opportunity. We put a long due date on it to get folks a chance to get in there. So from a change management standpoint, it really was the idea. We communicated early, we communicated often, we got more and more folks involved as we got closer to our rollout date and gave a lot more people visibility. It gave us feedback. I know I made huge configuration changes based on feedback. I'm like, you know what, you're right, I did that wrong, let's do it differently. And it was worth that time, it was worth the length of time it took for us to do it, and we got a lot of value out of it.
Sure, makes sense. Great. Another question here asking, does your HR department provide standards for learning objectives, general and or required curriculum? And is the curriculum aligned to competencies or levels of employment? So a few questions there.
Yes, that's a very deep question. So the first part, does HR provide the standards for learning? No, HR is not they're not the driver for those standards for learning. That's something that we decided early on that we were going to try to be careful about how we manage that, because what we didn't want to do is be really, really regimented, because learning outcomes, there's just lots of different kinds of learning outcomes, or there are best practices around that, of course, but we didn't want to do that too much. So what we more said was that each learning object, so each unit of training, each learning experience had to have an outcome that was clearly defined. So we looked at it more as you have to define that, because the risk obviously is that someone creates a training and it's like, well, why did I just take that? What was the point? So no, HR is not doing that, but we're saying it must have certain standards. So we've got a set of standards that lead to a standard around a learning outcome, objectives, what the curriculum should be, what does done and complete mean, what does competency mean. Do we have them aligned to competency? We do not. However, we actually did purchase that feature. It's a really awesome feature. We didn't have the folks in place that had the appetite or the time to actually do competency mapping, but oh, I wanted to do it so bad. I can't tell you. I really want to do it, but you could. So you could actually say, here's the competency mapping, here's what we need to find with the training, and we have the ability to do that. It's just we didn't have the folks that actually had the time to implement that, because that's a really big effort to do it properly. Oh, sure. Levels of employment. I can't quite answer the levels of employment. I can kind of answer it. So we have that, but one of the things that we're going through as a university is we're going back and looking at those, because right now an administrator in one department does not mean the same thing in another. So that's something that as a university we're actually doing that. So in the future I would expect that levels of employment will be part of those learning standards.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think you answered this one earlier on. Someone just asked for clarification. Are those 4 team members 100% assigned to this learning system? I think you said they weren't, right?
Yes, so that's a great, yes. So the 4 team members in that operations committee, yes, in the operations team, they are 100% full-time on Buckeye Learn. There's a manager, a working manager, a senior analyst, a more junior analyst, and then an operations coordinator that's doing a lot of the administrative type things. Okay,
great. Well, we've just about come to the top of the hour here. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We really appreciate it. And I'll wrap things up here for today. On behalf of University Business, of course, I'd like to thank once again Julie and John. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and expertise with us, and thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And thank you again to our sponsor, Cornerstone OnDemand, for their generous support of our seminar here. And to everyone in our audience, of course, thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found today's web seminar informative and useful to you. Producing events like this one is just part of our mission here at UB to inform college and university leaders like you about the latest news and trends, strategies, and best practices in higher ed management. You'll find more coverage about issues such as the ones we discussed here in the pages of our monthly print magazine, as well as our digital edition, our website, additional web seminars like this one, and in our e-newsletters such as UB Daily and Campus CIO. And as I mentioned before, for those of you who would like to share this event with your colleagues, anyone on your team, or if you want to go back over the presentation at your own pace, you can access it from our website by going to the URL on your screen here, where it will be posted as an archive recording within about 48 hours. And if you'd like to download the slides to go back over them, you'll find instructions and a link to them and a thank you email that you'll receive later on today. So keep an eye out for that. So that is it for today's event. Once again, I'm Kurt Isley-Durley for University Business. On behalf of our producer, Joseph Morrow, and everyone on my production team, goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thanks so much for joining us.